Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in Salesforce Apex Hour. Today we are going to talk about Salesforce AppSec, and we have a great speaker, Andrew Davis, with us. So let me hand over him for his introduction and the presentation.
Thanks so
Hand
much,
over to you.
Amit. Nice to have a chance to be back with you. Um, yeah, so I wanted to share some thoughts on Salesforce AppSec or application security. I'm calling this a wake-up call. My name is Andrew Davis. I've delighted to be back on Apex Hours. I've had a chance to share here a couple of times. I've been focused for the last 10 years on Salesforce DevOps, as it's called these days. Um, and I work at AutoRabbit. I have the incredible good fortune to lead the product organization at AutoRabbit. Also, over the last year, I got together with a number of people, including Amit, to form this organization called the Low Code Security Alliance. So if you're wondering what the Low Code Security Alliance is, it is a group of people. It's an independent body, although from AutoRabbit's side, I was involved in helping to get it started. It's not an AutoRabbit thing. It's not tied to any particular company. It's independent of companies. It's independent of Salesforce, but it's a bunch of concerned citizens, basically 15 of us who collectively recognized, these are Salesforce architects and security specialists, collectively recognized that there were significant gaps in the way people in the Salesforce world were thinking about securing the platform, or more specifically, there was an absence of thinking about securing the platform. So we'll come back to this at the end. Some links for Apex Hours you can see. But what I wanted to do is just give a little bit of an overview, and I'm acting in my capacity here as just a member of the Low Code Security Alliance, one of again these 15 founding members. We've now got 25 folks who are part of it, and you can find us at lowcodesecurityalliance.org if you're interested in more. In particular, there you can download a white paper which will have a lot of the details that I'm sharing here. This is a paper version, but so wanted to summarize the current state of Salesforce security. And just a lot of this may be obvious to people who are listening up front, but Salesforce has become absolutely central to the way many, many, many modern businesses operate. They have somewhere between 150 and 200,000 companies who are their customers, and many companies are all in on Salesforce. They literally have rebuilt huge portions of their company on Salesforce technology. Salesforce is no longer just a CRM. That's an extraordinarily outdated idea. Salesforce is now using the term company management software. Company management software, almost like an operating system for companies. And Salesforce, over its now, I guess, 27-year history, it has been involved in a lot of groundbreaking movements. So very, very early to cloud, very early to SaaS, very early to the low code movement. And now they're aiming to be in this early crop of AI powered organizations, AI powered platforms with Agentforce. And so Salesforce is really going big on trying to be first to market in this area as well. They were also quite early in mobile, and they've done a good job of trend spotting and trend hijacking. But um, low code uh, is not in the media like AI is in the media these days, but it's still incredibly important to understand how influential it is to have to have applications that you can build visually, applications that you can build in a way um, that's where what the application looks like as you're building it and how it looks when you're running it are the same, and it dramatically, anyway, I don't need to explain to you about low code. So Salesforce is getting more and more complex. They're acquiring very different companies. There's now over 700 different kinds of metadata, and they've got larger companies have scores or hundreds of people who are making changes to the Salesforce org. Now, if you want to find out more about Salesforce security, the definitive source is trust.salesforce.com. And essentially, the message on that website is trust us. Don't worry. Trust is our core value. We have a commitment to customer trust. They have a PDF, for example, that you can download called the Commitment to Customer Trust and summarizes what they do to secure the platform. Now, um, they spend 20, you might be able to see down here in the bottom right. This is page 22. The first 21 pages are all about all the things that Salesforce does to secure their platform. Now, on page 22, it makes clear that, hey, Salesforce, we're doing our part. You customers are expected to do your part. And your part, the customer responsibility, includes monitoring user behaviors and event logs, protecting sensitive customer data, and adopting the latest security controls and standards. So, okay, how hard could that be? Seems like just a small thing. It's just these 3 sentences here in their user guide. Now, but the reality is that what we're seeing here is what's called the shared responsibility model, where Salesforce says, hey, we're doing our part. We secure the platform. You need to do your part, which is to secure the application. And what we're talking about when we talk about AppSec, application security, we're not talking about the security of the platform, the underlying platform. In this document, Salesforce says, hey, we employ 1,000 full-time security professionals. I have no reason to believe that the underlying Salesforce platform is not secure. But it is possible to build on a 100% secure platform, but build a 100% vulnerable application on top of it. So this talk is about not the security of Salesforce as a platform. This talk is about the security of the applications that you build, application security, AppSec. So Salesforce is no longer a CRM. They're now company management software. But they are, more importantly, they're a platform on which you can build your own applications. And it is, I like to say that it's the most secure low-code platform in the world until you start customizing it. Because as soon as you customize Salesforce, you might potentially be opening up security vulnerabilities without realizing it. And so Salesforce, even on their trust site, they do make reference to this idea of a zero trust principle. Never trust, always verify. And there is very little verification happening in the Salesforce world. Now, the stakes on this are very high, that companies are investing millions of dollars into making Salesforce a platform for their companies, and those companies are multi-billion-dollar businesses. And within what you could call the crown jewels of PII, personally identifiable information, are things like customer names, addresses, emails, phone number, but also increasingly, as you have Financial Services Cloud, there's financial data on customers stored in Salesforce. As you have Health Cloud and similar applications, you've got health information, even replacements for medical records. Now, because Salesforce is such a unique platform, when you customize Salesforce, you're customizing something that's different from any other software application in the world. If you build a flow in Salesforce, although ServiceNow has their own version of flows, they're very different from Salesforce flows. You can't just take a Salesforce flow and migrate it over to ServiceNow. And what that does is it creates platform lock-in. And the more you've customized Salesforce, the more you've built unique things on there, the harder it is to move off of Salesforce, the more expensive it is to move off. And so customers are pretty well locked into Salesforce. Now, you're locked into Salesforce, but there's a shared responsibility. So Salesforce is doing their part, but they're leaving customers with the responsibility, the obligation to do their part. Now, low code enables faster development. Faster development is not the same as developing in a more secure way. Now, they've got security controls, plenty of security controls. Are you using the right security controls? Well, good question. Now, elsewhere in the company, imagining that you're at some large enterprise or in some way serving large enterprises, elsewhere in your company, when you have teams that are building custom applications, you have entire security departments that run security scans on what you're building. And so if I was off building Python apps or Java apps, something like that to run my company, we've got security departments who come in periodically, like, have you run your security scans? I'm going to use, Sonatype. I'm going to use JFrog, any of these things. We're going to scan for vulnerabilities. We're going to determine if you have any open ports and so forth. Lots of security tools used by these CISO organizations. Almost none of them work on Salesforce because Salesforce security is so radically different. What it means to secure Salesforce is so radically different from what it is to secure a custom Python application. It's just a totally different game, right? So um, people in the Salesforce world, they're not getting the assistance that other application development teams are getting. So when we look at what are some common security vulnerabilities in Salesforce development, so one of the most common issues is excessive permissions. So the issue is that if you have overly lax permissions, then an employee, somebody who officially has a license, or somebody who gets access to a license, directly hacks or social engineers their way into getting a user's and employees' credentials, or someone on a community site, or um, someone who is hacking your community. One way or another, they've got excess permissions. Now, why does this problem arise? Often the problem arises because the the layered nature of the Salesforce security model makes it very, very difficult for people to actually figure out what's going on and even knowing whether you're secure or not. So how do you approach this? The basic idea in the security world is called least privileges, emphasize least privileges, give the particular individuals and roles the least access that they need to perform their work, and then perform regular audits to make sure that they didn't over permission. So I mentioned briefly about Salesforce Communities or Experience Cloud, as it's known, or sorry, Digital Experience. I think that's the new name, right? It used to be Experience Cloud. Now it's Salesforce Digital Experiences. Um, these these to make these work, there are many undocumented APIs. There are the known APIs like the tooling API and the REST API and so forth at Salesforce. But to make the communities work, there's quite a lot of APIs, including there's at least 145 that I'm aware of that most of which are not published. They're not like officially known standards, but they enable communities to work. Now, if you have insecure configuration, excessive permissions, you might be leaking that if you have a Salesforce community digital experience site. Now, the question is, well, why doesn't Salesforce just fix this for everybody? Well, one of the reasons is they don't know. They don't know. They can't know. It's not their job to know whether you mean to show that information or not. Let's say you've got pricing for your products stored in Salesforce. Uh, you might want to publish your pricing, right? So you need people who come to the communities to be able to see the prices that you have directly in Salesforce or directly in the community. But another company might have very, very similar configuration, but they don't want anybody to see their pricing. They consider that pricing to be, proprietary, and it's only done on individual, the price books, for example, it's only done in conversation with an account executive. Salesforce doesn't know what your intention is for running your company. So they can't just say, hey, make sure that we're never exposing price books to community users. Now, how can you secure this yourself? This strict access control, there's a number of community-specific security recommendations. There's a book, Securing Salesforce Digital Experiences. I was looking for it on my bookshelf. It's not an easy reach, but Securing Salesforce Digital Experiences by Matt Myers is a nice book that summarizes some of the controls you can do. Ensuring that all of your object level defaults, your org level defaults are set to private, at least. And then only opening up those permissions when you need to actually share the data. Another aspect of security, and we've touched on this, these things are intersecting a little bit, but insecure APIs and custom code. So APIs where you somehow are reusing the same token again and again, the tokens don't expire, whatever, or you're creating custom Apex code, all of these uniquely created capabilities can open you up to new risks. So things like there are some certain Salesforce capabilities like named credentials uh, that can be used to help uh, at least securely store the credentials. So each of these are big topics, and I'm really just trying to give a broad overview. What kinds of practices do you need to help make sure that you're doing things safely? To a great degree, static analysis tools, automated security scanning, and so forth can go a long way towards helping identify risks in your custom code. And yeah, training your development team on how to securely store credentials, the importance of uh, making sure that you're not reusing the same tokens over and over and over again, that you've got a secure development lifecycle, code reviews, and so forth. These are all powerful. Now, what happens if you don't manage to secure things effectively? So data breaches, this is a report, I believe this is a report from Verizon. No, sorry, this is an IBM report that the average cost of data breach in 2024 last year reached $4.88 million, 10% increase from the previous year. So data breaches are extraordinarily expensive. Now, you might think, oh, it's very expensive. We don't have time to do a security review. We don't have the money to hire a Salesforce security specialist to help to look at our configuration. But arguably, if these are the kinds of numbers we're talking about, let's say you only have let's say you only have a 5% chance of having a breach on your Salesforce instance in a year, and I would argue that it's probably much higher than that. Even that's $240,000. 5% chance times 4.88 million for a typical breach. So that's $240,000, even for a 5% risk. That's a lot of, you could definitely hire somebody. You could definitely implement some practices, buy some tools and so forth to help mitigate that risk. That pays for itself. So risks, data loss risks, insider threats, the risk of exfiltration of the data. So who has permission to export data and so forth. It's a famous case of Salesforce sales reps exporting data when they leave the company and so forth. All of these are known risks, but there's also a lot of reputational cost and regulatory impact. So the SEC requires that companies notify the SEC within I think it's 4 days of discovering that there has been a data breach. So it's now a regulatory issue, but also huge reputational risk. Most of us probably can name a number of high-profile data breaches. Home Depot, Equifax come to mind. So knowing one of the ways you can mitigate this is talking with and working with your compliance and your security organization in the company. Even if they don't have Salesforce expertise, it's a partnership between these groups that's most important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of leadership and technical leadership in securing Salesforce. So I've been thinking and sharing a lot more about leadership in the last couple of years, but the behavior of teams hinges to a great degree on the behavior of leaders and what leaders do to set clear expectations and make clear the importance of security. And that leaders need to be thinking about security as a first-class concern as they're engaging in development, working with their development teams, and think about the long-term possible costs and what you need to do to mitigate these things. And those kinds of messages come obviously from the top of corporate leadership, but also at every level, leadership at every level, to the local managers of the teams, but recognizing as well that leadership is a quality. It's a quality of relationship. Even if you don't have a title as leader, you can still be demonstrating leadership within your organization just by bringing people's attention to issues like this. So transformational leadership is a particular theory of what makes for the most effective leaders. And the characteristics of a transformational leader are that they possess and share with the team a vision of what it is that they want to achieve. They model authenticity. They provide individualized support for the members of the team, and they gradually transmit the full responsibility of the organization, the endeavor to the people who they are leading, that they build up the people that they're leading to be independent. And so a transformational leader guiding Salesforce technical teams, they're setting the vision of we will have rigorous security in every part of our development lifecycle. They're showing authenticity in the spirit of complying with whatever the regulatory, whatever the security concerns are. They're being honest about what they think is going well, what's not going well. They're providing support for each of the teams that they're managing and so forth. And they're also transmitting the full responsibility to every member of the team, recognizing that there's a risk, of course, when you hand responsibility off to others, and that there's trust but verify. And so that they're helping to create this culture, making sure that people, even if they're not present and even if they're not looking over people's shoulder, they're still, the company's still adhering to um, these kinds of security practices. So what are some of the obstacles to educating Salesforce developers on security? What are some of the obstacles to making this work? If you look at where most people learn about Salesforce, it is from Trailhead. Trailhead's the main. Obviously, they go to Apex hours. They learn from Amit in his program, but Trailhead is kind of the canonical place to go and look at this. Now, if you look at the career section on Trailhead, it's got, typical salaries, and I know I was inspired by this when I first thought, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to, what kind of job do I want to get? Looking at salary potential. So they have a whole section on cybersecurity career. It's very interesting. None of it talks about securing Salesforce. It talks about general security ideas, but they don't directly talk about securing Salesforce, which is weird, right? They're not actually equipping people to be Salesforce application security experts, although there's a lot of good information in Trailhead on what you'd need to do. They're kind of sidestepping the issue because Salesforce is really afraid of anybody getting the idea that Salesforce is not automatically secure. And that's where there's a bit of abuse of this idea of trust. Salesforce trust is overused. So, sorry. That's part of the formal education, but there's also an informal education. I mentioned this earlier, the power and the importance of building bridges between the teams responsible for managing Salesforce and the general IT and IT security groups in the organization. Historically, these groups, Salesforce has intentionally tried to bypass the IT departments as much as possible and go and sell directly to the sales teams, and even get the sales teams hiring external consultants so they could do the implementation, completely bypass the internal IT and security group. And so this kind of stuff has earned the reputation, Salesforce is in that category of things broadly, often historically, not necessarily anymore, but historically Salesforce has been in that category of things known as shadow IT systems that were not provisioned by the official IT department. They're not, now, of course, these days, every IT department knows if they've got Salesforce in, it's typically a big expense, but it's not necessarily managed with the same kind of rigor and oversight that the IT department might manage a custom application development process. So what's the remedy for this? Communication, conversation, getting these various sides of the organization to talk with each other, recognize that really we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all just trying to run the company effectively and share information, work together, building mutual respect. This is how you learn in practice, right? Is this collaboration. And so last that's a point I wanted to make is just some recommendations. So first of all, nobody, it's it's uh, it blows my mind, how I still discover companies that are not thinking actively about Salesforce security. Those days are gone, right? The days when you didn't have to worry about Salesforce security and as a first class concern, those days are gone. Companies have wised up to a great degree. Um, and they're actually getting dedicated Salesforce security specialists in looking at things, thinking I'm also about um, how to set up training, ongoing training for the development teams and the admins on the importance of this, regular kinds of reviews, partnerships, regular reviews of code and configuration, weekly checklists, reviewing all of the issues that you need to look at. I will say AutoRabbit is also working on security-focused products that will help to make all of this much more manageable for teams. So you need some kind of an actionable security plan. You need to be looking at what are the overall greatest risks on Salesforce. What's the data that's most important to protect? And then looking at that in particular on a regular basis, figuring out how to continuously monitor the most sensitive data that you've got in the organization, setting some of these settings like org-wide defaults to private, these kinds of things. So I mentioned this guide. This presentation is a bit of an excerpt from this guide, Securing Salesforce. And it was such an honor to have a chance to work with a very, very brilliant group of people. And you can see all of their names listed in this document. But again, you can find more at lowcodesecurityalliance.org. And I want to go back. There was one slide I wanted to share here, just the closing out with the links for Apex hours and where to find more information. So hopefully this has been very helpful for everybody. You're welcome to hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any further questions on this, and you can find all of the Apex hours details here to subscribe and learn more. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Andrew.